So are you still on island?
Yeah, it's a tough. I just got back from the witchy meeting in Utah, and now I'm going to Maui for a few days later today, and then I got to go to Palau on Tuesday.
It's a
So,
rough life,
yeah,
man.
We feel for you, dude. We'll
yeah,
uh we'll be sending you all
yeah.
kinds of energy to like withstand it.
Oh, it's rough. He's got a rough thing going. Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Hardy Group's Fireside Chat for May. We're excited that you're here. Appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us. I We selected this topic, the power of strategy, crafting a resilient online learning strategy during challenging times, um, because it's what everyone's talking about. Everyone's talking about higher education, talking about where we're going in the future, how we're going to get there, the strategy of getting there, the reasons why strategic planning and strategic decision making is so important. So I am joined today. Well, first of all, I'm the founder and chief strategist for the Hardy Group. This is a group that I started a little over a year ago that does strategic consulting in a variety of areas, but a big part of that is for online education and higher ed. Um, I am also joined by Dr. Rob Robinson, who is a senior strategist with the group, and he's also our chief operating officer, which he will tell you means he basically does all of the things that I don't like to do. So he's very much appreciated for doing that. Those of you on this that know me know that I'm a queen of delegation. So I enjoy giving him tasks to do. But the highlight of our talk today is with Dr. Mark Milliron, Dr. Mark David Milliron. And Mark is currently president at National University. He's been there since 2022. And last week he was awarded the was it California Business CEO of
The
the
San
Year?
Diego Business Journal
Oh, I
CEO
was
of the
going,
Year award.
I was going full state. That'll be next. But I think many of you, if not all of you, know Mark and know that he has a long history of doing great work and creating good trouble that he has shared with me a few times in education. And he was chancellor of WGU Texas. He was a founder of Civitas Learning, and he's had several, other positions, but this one I think is probably the big deal, right? So with that, what we're going to do is have a conversation with Mark, and you'll have time to jump in, ask questions. You can put them in the chat, and if something's really burning and you need to ask it right then, I think we're all okay with that. Otherwise, we'll just wait until about 15 minutes to the close to have those questions and additional conversation. So, anything else to add to get us started, Rob?
No, looking forward to the conversation.
Great. All right. Well, Mark, we're so happy that you're here. Once again, I owe you one for jumping in what is always a very busy day in the life of Mark Millern, and really appreciate that. One thing I did want to mention as far as his background and bio, and he says this in his bio, but I know I've seen and can witness this, that his number one role and the one that he is most proud of and loves the most is being a father to Julia. I mean, sorry, Julia would shoot me. A husband for Julia, and then his four kids, um, Max, Marcus, Alex, and
Richard. Richard.
Richard. And I refer to them as the tall family. I don't know with all of them because Mark is kind of dwarfed by a couple of his kids, and I know I would be very small in that group. So so let's get started. Mark, the first thing I wanted to ask was, for you to tell us a little bit about your role at National, a little bit about National University itself, in case people aren't, fully familiar. But why has this role been such an important one in your career? So we'll kick it off with that.
Um, Thanks, Darcy and Rob, for inviting me into the conversation. Always glad to stir the pot with you all. National University is a really special place. It was founded by a Navy captain, PhD, about 53 years ago, who was teaching in graduate school at UCSD, and kind of heartbroken by he was watching service members trying to use their GI Bill in traditional model institutions and having a really hard time. And it just wasn't built for them. And what he realized was there needed to be something that was more, and it wasn't that traditional education is bad, it's just that the model didn't work for non-traditional working and military students in particular. So we went to WASC and with a group of 10 former officers, and they said, hey, we want to create a graduate school that was totally focused on military working and non-traditional students. And his big idea back then was, instead of doing 4 or 5 courses at the same time, let's do one course at a time. Let's do 4 and 8 week courses. And that creates a better cognitive load for somebody who's working and taking care of kids and really a more complicated life. That was the big idea back then. Fast forward from that crazy idea, we're now obviously open to undergraduate students. We're, I think our Carnegie classification that just came out, we're a nonprofit, private, undergraduate, graduate, doctoral, large. So we are one of only 41 of those in the country. And we are considered an opportunity university because we have high access, which means low cost, good flexibility, but we also have high earnings, which means our students do incredibly well after they get out. So we're one of that category. I think ACE called it, it was like 400 institutions in the country that are both high in access, high in outcomes, and high in earnings. And what's great about that is National, from its earliest days, has kept that same focus. We are 50,000 students now, about a third doctoral, about a third master's, about a third bachelor's. We have about 80,000 in workforce development, contract training. We are about 250,000 alumni over the course of that 53 years. But here's the thing I'll kind of bring up. We are still to this day 100% non-traditional working and military students. That's who we serve. Half for undergraduate student population is military affiliated, either active duty veteran or spouse dependent. But we're offering that population doctoral degrees, master's degrees, and bachelor's degrees. And what I love about it is we've always been willing to use whatever technology tool, technique, policy, practice that'll help those students be very effective. So when I was introduced to National, I've known National for a while, but when I was introduced to this opportunity, I was very happy doing the work I was doing, but I'm like, we were telling Julia, I like telling my wife, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to do this. Like National is just such an interesting institution. It's part of the ecosystem. It doesn't pretend to be what it's not. If you're an 18-year-old who wants a traditional experience, for the love of God, don't come to National. But later in life, when you're working, that's us, like in terms of what we do. Now, how that relates to me and my whole work, my whole career has been focused on, and I've worked across K-12, community colleges, universities, workforce development, nationally and internationally. But the red thread has always been, how can we pull policy and practice and innovation levers, use new tools, new technologies to open the door for more and more diverse students than ever before? Very focused on low-income first-generation students. Helped launch the Post-Secondary Success Initiative at Gates. I'm still on the board of the Trellis Foundation. I've done tons of work, whether it's in the corporate sector, government sector, education sector, all trying to figure out how we can help more students be successful. So National is just such a great kind of landing spot to kind of pull a lot of that work together. And I just am blessed with a great team and on a great mission. And we're able to partner really well with other institutions. We have 200 transfer agreements with community colleges. We're on the board of HAKU. We work openly with NICU and ICU on big advocacy efforts along with the President's Forum. We just like to be a good actor in the world of higher education, understanding who we serve and trying to do the work really well.
And, a couple of things that you said, when you talked about, the role that National is playing and its purpose, its mission, I think so much in higher education, we have universities and colleges that want to be all things to all people. And so they kind of not lose their identity, but they don't really have a strong identity aligned with a particular mission. And National definitely has that. And you have strong ties in your family to the military. So this must be very satisfying
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm a Navy brat, and the fact that my dad passed about 18, 19 years ago, and we hold our annual gala on the deck of the Midway, which is our big, fundraising event for our foundation and big connection. And I just remember the first time standing up on that deck and thinking to myself, Dad's looking down from heaven and smiling his face off, because he actually taught electronics in San Diego, and the fact that I'm back there helping, create this kind of pathway, especially for military learners, is kind of cool. But by the way, like, one of the things we've actually trademarked the name Anders, because our students are students and full-time employed, students and deployed, they're students and parents, they're students and our job is to meet them in the and help them and help adapt and get them on that pathway, but do it with a complete commitment to excellence. Like, we are fierce believers that you can be both accessible and excellent. You do not have to make a choice between the two of those. And so we are absolutely focused on high quality. At the same time, we're trying to provide low cost and flexibility and all that kind of larger work. And, we're doing it. We've got, $50 million a year in research. So we're a research institution. We're doing heavy work with, doctoral programs all the way through to certificate and associate programs and everything in between. It's really fun.
And I just love how the whole alignment has happened in your life and in your career. I just think this is so great. Rob, you want to take the next question for?
Yeah, sure.
Mark?
So Mark, I don't think it's any secret that and anybody in higher education is feeling this, that we are in times of change, that we have some shifting sands under our feet. There's been a significant change in the tone of the discussion around the country, and so I want to connect that to this idea of strategy and the ability to keep a strategic goal in mind and maybe have to change tactics as you move through that. You have positioned National well for that, so I'd love your thoughts on how to build strategy when the things around you might be changing fairly fast.
Yeah. And I'm a big believer in I don't know if you've ever read Tayyeb's book about black swan events and the notion of being anti-fragile, right? I'm a big believer in that. Like, I think if you have a good sense of who you are and you're grounded and you've got good data and you have a good strategy, that sense of grounding gives you the ability to weather the storms that tend to come your way. And that anti-fragility is super important in the world of higher education. By the way, I've been in this business now for 35 plus years, and I don't know when normal's supposed to happen, because everyone talks about how, like, oh, these times are like never before, and this is happening and that's like, I don't know when normal's supposed to be here, because wasn't it just like 3-4 years ago we're dealing with COVID, and then 3-4 years before that financial crisis, and we're just constantly. Then I go back to 9/11, right, and kind of the work we're doing. Like, just it feels like there's always something going on. So you better be on balance. And being on balance is not about only working kind of hard. Being on balance means you're on a firm foundation. You're really clear about who you are, what you do, and how you're trying to serve. And then from there, you can start pulling the levers, whether they're policy levers, practice levers, and outcome levers, to kind of get to where you are and figure out kind of where you want to go. And we're clearly in one of those moments right now. We're in a time of transition. But I go back to the transition from Clinton to Bush. I mean, it was pretty traumatic for a lot of people, and the huge programs were cut off and all kinds of stuff. I still remember taxi drivers telling me, oh my gosh, the boots and suits have descended and all the Texans are taking over DC. And we're constantly in that mix. So it's not making light of the moment, but it is saying you're always going to be meeting the moment. And you've got to make sure you get to ground on mission, vision. We call them our ways of work. Very clear on that and consistent. And then you're able to, especially if you work in alignment and authentic connection to that, and you build trust with your team, you can get to the level of nimbleness. But anybody who's been in these roles for a while knows that is built over time. You're not going to get that in the first 6 months. You got to just get reps, and then the team really builds the skill and will to be able to do it. And people know you're doing it not for ego, you're doing it because of mission, and you're kind of going in the right direction.
Yeah, I appreciate that anchoring in mission, because sometimes you talk to folks, like, all right, we're going to go through strategic planning process. Let's start with mission, and you might get a few eye rolls and stuff, but it is critically important so that everybody understands why the work is being done the way it's being done. And if we need to change the way it's being done, we're not changing the why it's being done. and that gets to the mission. So and as I've worked through lots of situations with lots of institutions, getting to ground on student success is why we're all here, and we might need to have a vigorous conversation about how we get there, but it's really about making sure that the students succeed. And you've done that so well. And
Rob, just to double down on that point for you, like this might be goofy, but I'm not kidding. Every executive meeting we hold, I have weekly directs meetings. We have monthly University Leadership Council meetings. We have our Senate meetings. We've got our board meetings. Every single one, we begin the meeting with our mission, our vision, and our ways of work. We literally talk through, we say the mission out loud, say the vision out loud, and our ways of work are what some people would call their values, but we call them ways of work because the idea is if somebody was watching us work, that we would evidence a commitment to championing student success, building trust, advancing inclusion, embracing accountability, and making things better. And by the way, we love making things better because a lot of people want innovation. It's like, no, innovation could be part of making things better, but so can picking up trash in the parking lot. So can fixing the drop-down menu on the website. It's aggregated marginal gains. Every little thing can make things better. But those ways of work have become anchored. And it might feel forced or it might feel goofy to some, but it is a level of comfort. Like everybody knows we're going to start there. And that's not just in our strategic planning sessions. That's every major executive meeting. We return to that idea.
That's exactly where I was going. It's about continually communicating the consistent, cohesive message around the mission, right? This is because if you can anchor that, the idea of the North Star, I think that's so important. And I know having worked with you, that's been consistent across pretty much all the roles that you've had. So when we think about the key to strategy, it's not that the strategy is going to take a radical change, but it's going to be anchored in the why, and then we'll talk about the hows. Right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
So, kind of piggybacking on what you were just talking about, I'm interested in your thoughts on the state of higher education right now. The relevance issue and how much of that is impacted when schools don't follow, when the leadership doesn't have the placemat like you have, that has the ways of work and the mission and vision, and reminding people of that. How do you think that's impacting the relevance of higher education in general and how people look at it?
I think we have an opportunity right now because of the importance of education. It's never been more important to open up pathways to possibility, to getting on. Leveraging education is like the door opener for more folks. The problem is we're in a moment where I think for about 10, 15 years, like people's recipe for fixing every problem in the world is go to college, go to college, go to college. And they went to low income first generation people and said, go to college, go to college, go to college. The problem is nobody knew what that meant. And so a lot of people flooded into higher education. There wasn't a lot of direction. There wasn't a lot of structure. And you ended up with a whole lot of people who had, ended up with debt and no degree, right? 40 million people out there with some college and no credential, which caused trust issues, right? In this larger, now the opposite is true, where a lot of low-income first-generation people are thinking college is a scam. They don't understand how important it is. It's actually gone the other direction. So part of what we need to do is kind of reestablish that trust and that focus on trying to help people realize what that pathway looks like, and then making sure we're getting to value in that larger work. So our theory of change about how we achieve our mission or vision is very simple. We embrace next generation education. We wrap it in whole human education, which is all about the right support at the right time for the right student. That's understanding who your students are, providing the right scaffold, whether it's academic, financial, career, whatever it is. But you literally use the most progressive, kick butt technology, technique, policy, practice, and education that is pushing to the next generation, wrap it with whole human support, and aim it at, here's the big part, you have to aim it at value-rich education. And value-rich education is comes to this basic idea, we don't think students come to National University to get degrees. And it's hard to say, they don't come to get degrees. We think our students are non-traditional working and military students. every single one of them have made a choice to come into education, obviously, often overcoming all kinds of barriers to get here. They've made a choice, and the reason they're getting the degree or whatever, because they want to change their lives. They want that promotion, they want that advancement, they want that new job, they want that new career. They're all wanting to change their lives. And so our job is to help them transform in that trajectory and change their lives. So it's not about like, let's just get the degree. It's like, what can we do that's going to help them change their lives? Which is why I think we're committed to the idea of the outcomes for that person when they're coming through. Now, that we think that means a combination of at least kind of three big things. We call it credential rich, connection rich, and experience rich. And credential rich is for every program. It's probably different for accounting than it is for HR, than it is for psychology. Like, figure out what are the family of credentials for that student that are going to give them the most power by the time they leave. So that means our job is to help curate the badges, certifications, and degrees for that person. So we want to actually build in certifications. So you can get a behavioral health cert that allows you to get a higher paying job while you're finishing your degree and then get your bachelor's degree after. You can get a construction management cert and then become a foreman and then continue on and get your construction management bachelor's degree. You can get your HR, you can get your SHRM certification and then get your master's in HR. Does that make sense? So like, we're building that all in together, but our job is like, we want to help curate that credential richness for those students. We actually measure something called credential density to make sure we're adding, and it's all about labor market valued credentials is the big deal. Now, the second part of that is connection rich, because what we hear from our alumni and from our students is sometimes the most important thing was not the degree. That was a checkbox. It was the people they met, it was the faculty connections, and it was professionals in the space they got to meet with. So we're trying to make sure we're building those connections into the programming so they can meet other students, they can meet the faculty and really build a relationship with them. They can build relationships with alumni and with professionals within the space. And so however we're doing this really cool near peering program we call our peer navigators. And this builds all kinds of relationships between the students as they're kind of coming along. And those connections, man, that's what everybody talks about. I've not heard one student at a graduation. We have our graduation coming up next week. I've never heard one student stand up and say, my learning management system changed my life. Like, no, they talk about the faculty and other people and other connections. It's those connections. So our job is a connection rich experience. And then the last one is experience rich, which is what are these experiences we're going to give them? And sometimes that's co-curricular. That has nothing to do with the class, right? So what are the things we can do that give them the experience? Sometimes it's apprenticeships, it's internships, it's clinicals, project-based learning woven in. But all of that, credential rich, connection rich, experience rich is all part of that value rich education, because we don't want them just to finish. We want them to actually have a transformative experience. Does that make sense?
It does. And, when
so
you
I'm just, Darcy, I'm
Okay.
just laying that out because that's how we collectively in higher ed can reestablish trust.
Yep.
Right? Because then we are laser focused on giving them value. So when they leave, they have that kind of value. So I think our job in higher education is making sure, God, my heart breaks when I go to a conference and all anybody's talking about is growth. It's growth,
Yep.
growth.
Yep.
When I came here to National, there's a lot of conversation around, hey, we have a chance we could be a mega university. I'm like, I don't want to be a mega university. I want us to be a great university. And I actually firmly believe, especially in the age of AI, with deeply connected review systems, what you need to do is be good to grow, right? If you can be good to grow, just focus on being really good, and guess what? And then focus on students telling other students, and that actually is the most organic and healthy way to grow possible. That's kind of where it plays out.
And I didn't mean to interrupt you a minute ago. What you said about the credentials, you taught me something back. Well, you've taught me a lot of things, but you taught me something specifically relevant to the work I was doing when I went to Washington, with many thanks to the Gates Foundation and you to work in the Obama administration, working on the $2 billion TACT grant program for community colleges. And you and I had a conversation about stackable credentials. And I was not familiar with that in 2011. Right. And just seeing it in a different light, if schools would see the things that you're talking about of providing a credential rich and an experience rich and, and the people being involved and really thinking more, student forward of what they're going to get that they can actually use even while they're working on that degree, they can get certifications, they can get,
Yeah.
badges. There are things they can be working on to build out their portfolio of education.
But that's where the strat plan is so important, because in our strategic plan, it is anchored in that theory of change. Our theory of change is next gen, wrapped in whole human, aimed at value rich, is our pathway towards achieving our mission and our vision. That's all articulated. And then we have a set of foundational work we have to do to be able to do that. Like we're not going to be able to achieve next gen without a great tech stack. We're not going to be able to get to value rich without being able to kind of build out our foundation and community connections, our employee development. And so we have all these foundational things that we're working on that are going to help us get there. But that anchor in that strat plan means I can go now to we have 150 programs at the university. And I've done this. Literally, we've met with all the academic program leaders and we've said, here's our plan, next gen, whole human, value rich. I would love for each of you to be able to articulate how you're making sure we're having the most next generation education in your program. How are we having the best whole human supports? What are we doing to build those connections in? What are we doing around value rich in your program? And have them become design champions of weaving that into every single one of our programs. Because it's so concrete, it can be real, it can cascade all the way through the organization. And that cascade is wildly important for us. And by the way, that strat plan guides our annual operational plans. It guides our budgeting. It guides our employee evaluation and our hiring strategies. Everything all cascades from that, even into our program development and kind of out. And what's nice is there's ground. Like people know like that if this is the plan, this is the direction. If you can speak to it, you're going to get airplay.
But one thing.
Sure.
Man, I lost it. Never mind.
It's okay.
That's because I interrupted you.
I know what it was about the strategic plan and the fact that you actually use it. And I would suspect that every single person who is attending this, it's at an institution, has experienced the sort of the Raiders of the Lost Ark kind of thing where the strategic plan is developed and then it just sits on a shelf and no one really, they may go back and revisit every once in a while. You're actually incorporating that and allowing it to drive where the university is going instead of going, well, we wrote that last year, but we're just going to put it over here. We're going to do something else. So,
and then making it a part of, and what, by the way, we didn't go on high and write this and come back. We actually built this over the course of a year with thousands of people's input to get to the themes and the directions and the ways of work. And like ways of work came from, hey, a university-wide survey at our best, if we are operating at our highest, what would people say about us? What would they say that we are doing? Like, how would they describe us? And that's where ways of work came from. It's like, this is our aspiration. We want to be champions of student success. We want to be builders of trust, advancers of inclusion, embracers of accountability, and people who are making things better. And what's great is because they help develop it, there's so much greater sense of ownership. And now the most important thing for me is just say it again and again and again and again. And then weave it in. Like literally every board meeting, we have a board member who's a waykeeper. At the end of the board meeting, will reflect on during that board meeting, how did we show up in the ways of work in terms of championing student success, building trust, advancing inclusion. And so they like check themselves. I love it because like now they're kind of owning that. But it's amazing how many times you have to say it before it sinks in. And how many times you have to use it before it sinks in. I understand why some strat plans have turned into, doorstops or kind of dusty volumes on the shelf, but it's not going to work for you. And again, this is how you leverage strategic planning to create that anchoring effect, that grounding, that balance that allows you to handle the meeting of the moment that Rob was talking about in the beginning. If you want to be able to meet those moments, you got to be on balance, which means you got to know what you're about. And for us, it all begins with who we serving. Who are we serving? We're very clear about who our students are. Our students are Anders. We love that student population. Doesn't mean we don't care about the 18 to 20-year-old coming out of high school, whatever it is, but we actually think we're champions of Anders. Like I'll tell people all the time, it's like, I'll ask audiences to close their eyes and pick a picture of a college student. I'll have 1,000 people in the audience and I'll say, picture a college student. And then get that picture in your head, and I'll come back and say, how many of you thought of a 36-year-old woman with 2 kids? How many of you thought of a construction worker? How many of you thought of a deployed soldier? No hands go up. What do they think of? An 18-year-old with a backpack on the quad, not working, going full-time, which is an important segment of higher education, but it is a small segment of higher education. And part of our work is to advocate for our students, right, in terms of our larger work. And because we have that like understanding of who we serve, and by the way, if I was at a traditional institution, I'd be talking about that 18-year-old because that's what would matter. And by the way, I value that. I love that. I've had those kids. When my daughter went to UT Austin, I wanted UT Austin to be focused on that stuff, right? I have a son right now going to Western Carolina. I want them to be focused on that stuff. But later in life, when he's working full time and wants to get some kind of a graduate degree, I'm hoping he finds a place like National.
Yeah, and I think you've touched on a couple of interesting themes. If we're thinking about higher education as a sector, your approach, I think we could all acknowledge that at many institutions it would be difficult to accomplish that approach. And in particular around, I mean, I think their lines are blurring around modalities, but online at many institutions, online deliveries is still othered in some ways.
Yeah.
And so thinking through how to cast that important strategic umbrella across all of that, including strategic plan around the online group, because as you said, the mantra at many institutions is growth at any cost. And coming out, and they're looking at the demographic cliff, they're saying the only way to accomplish that is online. And so they're running into the unknown in some ways, hoping that they will suddenly become king of the world. And so the concept of a strat plan component for the online function of an institution, I'd like your thoughts about that.
Yeah. So what I always find funny is when people like, when they go, oh, National University, you're an online university. It's like, stop. It's like we were founded in 1971. Like there's no online, like unless we were in some kind of advanced research project that nobody was telling us about. Like it is we'll use whatever tool, technology, technique, policy, practice that will help our learners learn more effectively. Full stop. Right. So the big cutting edge technology in 1972 that we were using was the cassette tape, right? So like very different. So we've morphed, and now we use online, we use hybrid, we have a metaverse campus. We'll use, again, we'll pull it in. I mean, before COVID, we were only 50% online. And so we flipped over, we're about 80% now. The thing I would say is I don't think you should have an online strategy. I think you should have a learning strategy to meet the needs of your students and then leverage whatever tool or technology makes the most sense. And I would argue that today, more and more students leverage the online format for everything from deeper learning, time shifting, flexibility, all kinds of things. And Rob, you and I wrote an article where we actually found students who mix online and on ground actually do better than other students. And part of it's because it's about creating the learning mix that matters the best for the students. So I'm not about online versus on ground. I think, I've had terrible on ground experiences and I've had fantastic on ground. I've had terrible online and fantastic online. It's about the instructional design. It's about the technology. It's about whether or not the student is bringing, their effort and the student has to bring their energy to this whole thing. So for me, institutions who want to have an online strategy just to have as a side hustle, they want to keep doing what they're already doing and then do it online as a side hustle to make some money, to build in revenue. Like that breaks my heart. It online should be like, I love what UCF has done, which is, hey, our students really value the flexibility of online. Let's do a lot of like hybrid programming and not half and half classes. Like let them take 3 classes on ground and 2 classes online so they can flex their lives even while they're living on campus, right? And that's become like a real thing for institutions to realize how that plays out. I was just with Greg Smith, Chancellor of the San Diego Community Colleges. Post-COVID, they are now about 53% online at the San Diego Community Colleges. They have facilities all over San Diego. They're still full. Things are going on, but they're blending online as part of the student experience in some really interesting ways. So I think for me, it is figuring out how, and it always breaks my heart when people start talking about working learners or adult learners because their side hustle way of doing it is like, let's take what we're already doing and we'll just do it at night. And
Yeah.
that's going to work for adult learners. Like, no, we've actually got to start thinking, like, how do we use whatever tool or technology or technique there to meet the needs of learners that we care about, that we think we could be good with it, and then design for those kind of learners. If you want to do non-traditional working and military learners, God bless you, jump in the pool. We need more help. Like I said, 40 million people with some college and no credential. We'll take 1%. You can have the rest, right? There's plenty of work for everybody. But this is different work. You better be thinking about who these students are. You better care about them and not make them, it's not about whether or not they're college ready. It's about whether or not you're student ready for those folks.
Correct. Correct.
And we, sometimes when we're working with schools, they have very good intentions. They have very good intentions in their minds, but they have not sat down as an institution to determine what their vision is. Who are they serving?
Yep.
Why are they serving that population? How best to serve them? And I understand, multiple modalities. But sometimes we'll talk to a school and they've got an executive leader that says, I want to have 5 online programs next fall. And that's really the only direction they get. So there's not a tie-in to the institution itself, nor is there rhyme or reason about why 5, like, where are we trying to go? Do you have advice for people who are in institutions where that's happening?
Well, every institution's different, and I don't want to cast aspersions on motives for people who are trying to get into it. There might be righteous motives for what they're trying to do and the ways they're trying to do it. I do think starting small, learning and building your infrastructure is super smart, right? I think it's important to kind of and then figure out, okay, this is a unique area where we could actually add a lot of value, and we think it fits with our brand, fits with our student population. Let's launch this program or this set of programs and really learn about how to do it. I am deeply convinced at my work at Gates Foundation that I really like the Rogerian kind of innovation model, where you really support those innovators and early adopters in doing this kind of work. But then as they're doing that work, you better just learn, collect a lot of data. Because once you have the data about what works and what doesn't, you can get that early majority, and you're going to get more and more people buying in, or I hate the term buying in, they're going to actually join and they're going to want to be a part of it. And then you're starting to go up that curve, that adoption curve, right? And then once you get more people in there and you start getting reps, you can build playbooks. And once you have playbooks where things are basically plug and play, you already have the course shells designed, you've got the models, but it's amazing how then the late majority will jump on because it's plug and play, right? And then that's how you kind of get more of this stuff kind of coming on board. But you've got to make sure you do the work to, again, collect the data, get the evidence, understand what's working, what's not, be tough-minded about it, and then develop the playbooks and make it really easy for people to implement, because people are busy. There are a lot of folks who are, they're going to jump in when you've got the playbook done, right? They're not going to be in the early side. Now, other folks really love the idea of that new thing, and so they're going to put in that extra energy and kind of like be able to help you stand it up. That's kind of how
and that there, in my experience, there needs to be a little bit of caution around that next shiny thing, because there are a group of people that just want to be out on the edge innovating.
Yeah,
and
their hyperbole is nuts. They're just saying that's going to fix everything. It's going to blow everything out. We've all lived through it, whether it's MOOCs or whatever it's going to be. It is always, it's fascinating to watch. I think leaders, who are in these roles are constantly trying to calm down the caustic cynics who are angry about everything, trying to temper the true believers who are way too happy about whatever's new, and create a space where we can get thoughtful consideration and plans about how we're going to go forward. It's tough because those extremes are loud and they tend to be intellectual bullies, and you kind of have to like calm that down to develop it. It is, I do think this work is fun though, because by the way, with the lessons we've learned, and I would love to have this conversation with anybody. You've lived through it along with me. I think the lessons we learned on integrating microcomputers and that entire revolution helped us with the internet. The lessons we learned on the internet helped us with, kind of advanced analytics and like that. And then now the lessons we've learned on that are helping us with AI. And I think the time horizons shortened, we're adopting faster, but we're still a lot of the same things are there, and we're still trying to figure out the best way to use I would argue the microcomputers, the internet, and AI are transformative infrastructures for education. And it's really important that we're thoughtful and not hype cycled around it. And we're doing some really fun work. We have an AI council that's really leaning into this. We're weaving AI into all of our programs. We have some really interesting kind of work with that. But I think it's very similar to the lessons we learned with, with online.
And just like every one of those iterations you just talked about, there's a level of fear because you're moving somebody's cheese, right? It's like, well, that's not the way we've always done it. And yes, that's the point, right? There's new ways to think about how we do this, but never lose sight of the why we're doing this, right? Which is that mission.
But I'll go back, to Darcy's kind of core thing. Like, this all begins with, you've got to do the work and be willing to dive into the conversations to build a collectively shared vision, mission, direction. And it's hard work to do it. Boy, it's a lot easier to go to a retreat with 4 or 5 leaders and design what you want and come back and try to sell it to the place. Never works. Been around for 35 plus years. Every time somebody tries to do that, I turn to somebody left or right of me. I'm like, that guy will be gone within 2 years. Like, it's just, no, it's not going to work, because but where the magic is, and I've seen every shape and size of leader you can imagine who's been radically successful. And there are some common things. And one of them is they build a shared vision. They build a shared mission. They work through the muck sometimes to be able to get there. And they build a sense of opportunity, and they support people in kind of driving this kind of larger change. So you got to do that work. And once you get to the building of that strat plan, you got to use it. Right? You got to use it. I used to, my line about data don't get better till you use it. You can have the best data infrastructure in the world, but if you don't use it, it's a waste. Same thing with a strat plan. You can have the best strat plan in the world, but if you're not using it and refining it, and that means every year you got to refine it and connect it and just kind of pull and measure like crazy. Like, well, I can tell you, like, we have clarity. We have 5 core measures, and then we have sub measures under all of they're all connected directly to our outcomes. And it's wonderful because people know what we're looking at. Like, they know why we pick those measures. They know how we're kind of leaning into them. Glad to unpack that with anybody here if you want to go there. But it's the idea that we're using it, and by using it, we're just getting better. And every month I've been here, we've gotten better on persistence. We're getting better on our financial sustainability. We're getting better on just all kinds of kind of core metrics. It's been fun to watch.
Oh, unmute. I want to ask you something about, I don't want to use the word buy-in either, but people coming on board. So when you come in, new president, you've got people focused on the vision and the mission and who you're serving and how you're going to go about it. What's your recommendation to leaders to get the buy-in or to get people on board with what you're telling, what you're seeing, what your vision is along with your team? What's your recommendation on how you get others to engage with that?
I would say, first and foremost, for the love of all that's holy, do not come in with your vision, right? Come in with, you have ideas and you have experience and you have thoughts about where you go, but your job is to learn your organization. Like, I want to understand the people. I want to understand the history. I want to understand what we're strong at. And I told people, like, I'm not going on a listening tour. I'm going on a learning tour. And I started literally going to programs. Tell me all about your program. Tell me all about this service. And that takes a while. You got to invest some time to be able to do it. And that learning just helps you. And then the strategic planning process you end up learning a ton more in that larger process. But if you don't walk in, of course, you're going to bring your insights and ideas and experience and possibilities, but you got to dive into that organization, understand its history, fall in love with its history, fall in love with kind of the direction, get to know the programs, and learn a lot about the aspiration and directions. And, I can't tell you how many things I thought coming in that I've completely shifted on. It's like, oh, that's not going to work here, but here's the direction we can kind of go on. But that's got to be authentic. You got to get in and just do the learning and be connected. It can't be like, oh, I just can't wait till I can get my stuff going, right? You got to get in, and then once you kind of build that sense of shared direction, then it's like, one of the things I can say authentically and openly is when I'm trying to like champion the ways of work is, hey, we all stacked hands on this. We all said, this is where we wanted to go. We're going to hold each other accountable for this. And let's make sure when people are seeing this, we're making this decision not because of a financial thing. We're making this decision because this is championing student success. We're caring deeply about the learning outcomes of our students and the quality of the programming that we're coming in. And by the way, I mean, if you're smart, you realize that kind of success actually is unbelievably positive for on your sustainability side, because when students tell other students about you, suddenly enrollment goes up. It was like our first year kind of diving into this work full blast. Like again, and this is after we've kind of put the kibosh on anybody talking about a mega university. It's like, stop that. Focus on being good to grow and focus on high quality. And our whole focus was on that, and we grew 14% in that year. And this university had not grown double digits in 2 decades. And it steady growth, no doubt, but not double digits like that. And I got to tell you, part of it's because we tried softer. We actually focused not on that. We actually focused on trying, and it was actually a problem. We were growing too quickly, which is like, I was glad to have that problem. But it's interesting to me because and by the way, our cost of student acquisition went down by almost 15%. And that's not normal in these processes, but that's because the organic channels took over, the social media took over, the students tell other students. And so it's one of the reasons we're deeply committed to MPS and to student engagement surveys, because they tell us what students are saying and we listen deeply. And we redesigned even our course evaluation surveys to just 4 questions to just make sure they could get high response rates and we could hear what the students were saying, change the entire dynamic of the organization.
So I guess that's what I was kind of getting to about not necessarily you coming with your vision, but once the vision was established, after you were there, getting people involved and engaged in it. It sounds like there's a lot of communication that happens at National, from the leadership to faculty and to staff.
And they're going to be involved. And the last thing I'll say is, one is you as leaders just have to be involved in the work and make sure you're kind of like cascading the placemat and the kind of larger connections. But we've also invested deeply in professional development. It's part of our strat plan elements. We've done a lot in leadership development. Again, we have weekly directs meetings with my folks, but we have monthly University Leadership Council, which is the kind of top 52 leaders, and it's a 2-hour deep dive, and we actually have a joint reading we all do around. And so we've, like, most recently we read The Power of Moments. Right before that, we did the Unreasonable Hospitality. We did an entire workshop on kind of the future of AI. But we have a joint reading every time that we all get smarter on, along with kind of general university stuff. And then we've rolled out the National University Leadership Academy, which is our kind of training academy, deep dive training academy with 25 rising star leaders across the university to really steep them in student success change at the organization. It's about a 9-month program. But part of it is so that we can make a leader-full organization. And if we can get a leader-full organization, Mark doesn't scale. What scales is a leader-full organization where people really kind of get our plan. That's what's going to scale.
Yeah, I think the greatest analogy there, because those people are going to do great work at National and then go somewhere else. The fact that I think 40 to 50% of any level of coaching in the ABA came through the Spurs organization under Greg Popovich. That's planting the seeds, right? That's making everybody better.
Yeah, and you're sad when good talent leaves, but you also want them to rise and thrive and know they might come back at some point. So it's really good. This is great work. But going back to your original question, Rob, to meet this moment, you better be on balance, right? And you better have a plan to be able to do it. Otherwise, because if you're all over the place, you're going to get whacked over pretty quick.
Right, and defending the status quo may not be the best option.
For sure. One last question, and then I don't see any questions coming up in the chat, but people may have something to say to join the conversation here. But I do want to ask you, because I consider you a visionary and a futurist when it comes to higher education. If you had your way, if you had a crystal ball, if you had a magic wand, and you could make higher education in the way that you think it should be, what would it look like in 5 years, 10 years?
Yeah.
It's
a hard question. It's a hard question because it's funny, when I used to do work with the State Department and go to other countries talking about American education, I would get there and they'd like, tell me about American higher education. I'm like, which of the 50 models do you want to talk about,
Exactly.
right? Because there's
Exactly.
such a panoply of things that are happening here. And I actually kind of like the mess because we don't end up with one best way that tends to be very focused on tradition or all kinds of challenges. Here's what I would say is I think for American education systems, I think we have to learn how to value different players in that system and get out of better than conversations. We are like where R1s are better than R2s or better than community colleges or better than like, no, I actually think we're better with a family of high quality education offerings out there. I actually want public K-12 working at a high level, private K-12 too. I want really good, independent universities, really strong public universities, really strong community colleges. It's figuring out how to like reward people for the good work they're doing for the students that they're really serving, to make sure that that's what's happening and not trying to make everybody like everybody else. I really don't want community colleges acting like Research One universities. They're different animals, right? But that means we actually need to develop strategies, policies, and practices that actually reward the variety. And so some of this has to do with that. Again, I go back to that conversation about the college student. So we have to get that mental model out of our head because we have to shut up about Harvard. All we want to talk about is Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, Yale. It's like that's 1%, if that. Like we're talking about like far less than 1%. We've got to be talking about the array of higher education and valuing it all, and then figuring out what are the funding strategies, what are the policies that will actually enable them to do it well. It's hard to be in higher ed right now. The cascading form of programmatic accreditation, what used to be called regional accreditation, combined with federal oversight, combined with the different licensure requirements, combined with the specifics of different kinds of regulations that are coming down, whether it's from the feds or from the Department of Ed and others. It is figuring out how we can make it easier for good actors to actually provide what was really going to work for the students. I think that's where, kind of good things. And I'll give you just a simple example. I think Pell is a fantastic program, and Pell, however, was designed for right from high school students going to traditional education. We've made some fixes to it here and there to make it work for non-traditional, but it really is based on that. I actually think we should completely reform 5250, and there's a whole 127 coalition that's focused on this. I think the tuition assistance programming, if we can radically increase that, which hasn't been raised since '84, you create an entire employee assistance model where earning and learning becomes a reality. And if that you raise 5250 to like $12,000, you suddenly now have a bunch of employers who want to work directly with higher ed. You'll see more internships, more apprenticeships, more connections. But that becomes a complement to Pell, where we end up having Pell and that side by side. And now you've got options for the right from high school student, and you have options for the working student. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And to me, I think that's where, like, if we can get higher ed kind of coming together around those kind of things, that and just the willingness to test, try, and tune different tools and technologies, AI, online, whatever it might be.
Rob, did you have something?
No, I was just going to throw it out there to folks and see if there were any questions. We're a small, intimate group. You can come off mute and ask a question.
Or share your experience, David
Yeah.
Lassner.
We may be at time for folks though too.
Yeah.
I understand that.
I know that David's retired president, but
I have forgotten everything I knew.
Congratulations.
If there was anything there, I'll just say I wake up every morning and I read the paper, and I think I found a very good time to stop being a university president in this country.
As says every president who retires.
Correct. No matter when, right?
No matter when.
Yeah, I guess that might be true.
well, I know we're at the top of the hour, and everyone has places to be. This is being recorded, and you'll be sent the link to the recording, and encourage you to share that with your colleagues, because I think this was a great conversation with Mark. It always gives me some new insights on leadership and how things can work better in higher education. So I want to thank you all, and Mark, definitely thank you for being here and taking the time to talk with us. And hopefully we'll talk again soon. So thank you, everyone.
I look forward
Thanks,
to
y'all.
Darcy and
Thanks,
Rob,
everybody.
my favorite people.
Great to see you all.
Yeah, for sure.
Bye, guys.
See you.
Yeah,
Bye.
take care.
All right. Bye-bye.